Hi, this is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles. Today is July 24th, 2020, and I'm coming to you from Old Orchard Beach, actually Ocean Park, which is a part of Old Orchard Beach, and it's nighttime. It's a little late, and I need to get this show on the road so Darlene and Sophie can come upstairs and go to sleep in the bedroom. I have an interview this week with Baratunde Thurston, and it's a full circle event because Baratunde was my first guest on TKC 1, which aired on July 26, 2008. I recorded it at this very desk in this bedroom at the cottage. And we had a good chat. I caught up with him in L.A. a couple of days ago and talked about the Kindle, and we were both such enthusiasts of the Kindle in those early days. And it's also was interesting to me to find out a little bit more about the kinds of activities that Baratunde has been active in the last couple of months. I'll also have a news story I want to talk to you about and a tech tip. So let's get started. Well, if you are like me, you might have been looking forward to some television watching on Monday of next week. That's when Jeff Bezos and the CEOs of three other big tech companies, Apple, Google, and what's the other one? Facebook, were all due to testify before a subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee. It was delayed, postponed indefinitely because of a memorial service scheduled for Representative John Lewis, who passed away on July 17th, a legendary civil rights pioneer and longtime member of Congress from Georgia. I really was looking forward to this with mixed feelings because I didn't expect it to be a very enlightening conversation between Jeff Bezos. I was more focused on him than the other three, and this subcommittee. But I guess I thought it would be an interesting way to see how Jeff did. Does he get provoked? Does he get angry? Does he get impatient with stupid questions? Is he able to look into the future with a vision that is compelling and changes some minds? I remember there was a famous, I think he was a representative, it might have been a senator from Rhode Island back in the days when I was living in Rhode Island, John Pastore. And there was a hearing where he was grilling Mr. Rogers about funding for public television. And it was one of these moments that you sort of dream might happen in a congressional hearing because Mr. Rogers was so authentic. Fred Rogers was just telling how important it was that the government spent money on these shows that helped children to value themselves and to live good lives. And you could just see this kind of hardened senator from Rhode Island, a rough place in those days, as I recall, was moved. He was touched, and he saw things that he hadn't expected to see, and I think that the PBS got their budget. Well, I think it would be too much of a fantasy to think that because Jeff Bezos is such a great guy and he's such a futurist and he's customer centric, all the things that I tend to ascribe to him, as well as the fact that I've talked to him twice on the 4th anniversary and the 8th anniversary of this show, and he's a very charming person in person, very unprepossessing and just a nice guy who treated the interview with this podcaster seriously, and we had a good conversation. So I'd love it if there was a chance for him to show a little about the company that would be important for legislators to know as they try to figure out if antitrust rules need to be recast in the digital age. And that's why all four of these companies are scheduled to appear. And there has been an investigation by the subcommittee. I think it started about a year ago. It was supposed to have had a report in April. It's now been delayed probably till the fall. And then the Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission are looking into issues of antitrust. When companies get this big, issues of antitrust are reasonable to look at, and I've said in the past I don't much like the cheap shots that get taken against Amazon, and I forget who it was on one of the recent shows. Somebody said, well, the reason they go after Amazon is because it's news. If you say something about Amazon, everybody listens, and never mind that it has the highest reputation among customers of any company in the world in a lot of different surveys. It's an important company that deserves scrutiny. But that scrutiny will not be coming Monday as planned. I don't know when it will be rescheduled, and everybody was going to be talking by virtually. They weren't going to. It wasn't going to be Mr. Bezos goes to Washington. It was going to be Mr. Bezos goes to an audiovisual studio at Seattle, or perhaps at his home, and is beamed into the subcommittee, the antitrust subcommittee. Interesting. I hope we do get a chance to see that. And there was a question at one point as to whether Jeff would agree to testify. I have a hunch that when all four of the major tech companies were invited, then that made it easier for him to go and perhaps harder for him to not participate if he thought there was an option for that. Let's just go slide right into the tech tip. John Aga sent me a link a while back, and it's a good story by Barbara Krasnoff in The Verge, published July 6th, and it's how to convert a PDF to Kindle format. I think there's another way to do this using the Send to Kindle app. That's what I use when I if I get a PDF file, I tend to just drag it onto that app on my Macintosh, and then it propagates to my Kindles. But I think this is also a good system to know about, and the essence of it is that you may not know, but each of your Kindle and Fire devices, if you have more than one, has an email address that is associated with it, and you can find these in the Manage Your Devices and Content tab at your Amazon.com site. So when you find out, say you had a PDF and you wanted to get it onto your Oasis, you could find out what is the email of my Oasis, and then you would take the PDF and create an email having the to field be that address of your Oasis, and then in the topic line you would write convert, and then you would simply drop the PDF into the email and you'd send it. And it takes a couple of minutes, and then if all goes well, when you check your Oasis in a couple of minutes, you'll see this document. And the advantage is that if it's a PDF that mainly has text, it's converting it to Mobi format, so it'll flow. And if you want the font bigger, and if you want to look up all the things you can do on a Kindle book, it's for the right kind of document. It's just much easier to see it on the Kindle. And sometimes when I get a long manuscript from a writer friend of mine, I like to curl up in a chair with it. I don't want to read it on my computer. So it's perfect for that kind of activity. It's a good, clear step-by-step process, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes if you want to give it a try. And thanks to John Aga for sending that to me. I'll say that as I've been thinking about the show, anniversaries always get me kind of thinking ahead, and wondering if I'm actually going to keep doing this. I had a couple of days ago, if you listen to the Morning Journal, you might have heard that I had pretty much decided that 12 years was enough, and I'm going to be 70 next month, and I want to do more writing. Not so much today. I woke up today thinking about the new Kindle Chronicles and all of the things that I enjoy about this, and also that I'd like to be a little more helpful to you. That I've gotten feedback over the years that the tech tips and things that I've said to help you get the most out of your Kindle are really valued. And I enjoy doing them. They take a little more work, frankly. I mean, I can't put together a really detailed tech tip at 10 o'clock at night on Friday, but I think what I'm going to try to do is work a little harder on that. And I think that the news can be found about Amazon lots of different places. But if I can think of this as hopefully a useful podcast in addition to the interviews, which, not everybody is interested in the same kind of people I am. So in view of that, in the past, it has been helpful if somebody if you have a question, like I'm thinking of doing this and how do I do this? That's gives me a good chance to try to solve a problem that maybe other people would have as well. And then also, if you see something like John Aga did on this, converting something to Kindle format, send me the link. You can send it to me at podchronicles@gmail.com, and then I can pass it along. So that's something I'd like to kind of focus on in the 13th year of the Kindle Chronicles as that comes around next week. Time now for the interview. To reintroduce you to Baratunde Thurston this week, he's been on the show twice before, once that first time and then on one of the other anniversaries. I want to read you a passage from his introduction to How to Be Black, which is his 2012 satirical memoir published by HarperCollins. And I'll just read a few paragraphs because it first of all, it shows you he's a pretty good writer and he's got quite a story. My name is Baratunde Thurston, and I've been black for over 30 years. I was born in 1977 in Washington, D.C., in the wake of civil rights, Black Power, and Sanford & Son. My mother was a pro-black, pan-African, tofu-eating hippie who had me memorizing the countries of Africa and reading about apartheid before my 10th birthday. My Nigerian name was not handed down to me from any known lineage, but rather claimed and bestowed upon me by parents who demanded a connection, any connection at all, to Mother Africa. Yes, I grew up in, quote, the inner city at 1522 Newton Street, and I survived D.C.'s drug wars. Yes, my father was absent. He was shot to death in those same drug wars. But it's also true that I graduated from Sidwell Friends School, the educational home of Chelsea Clinton and the Obama girls, and Harvard University. I love classical music, computers, and camping. I've gone clubbing with the president of Georgia, the country, twice. My version of being black adheres as much to the stereotypes as it dramatically breaks from them. And that's probably true for most of you reading this. If not about blackness itself, then about something else related to your identity. Through my stories, I hope to expose you to another side of the black experience while offering practical comedic advice based on my own painful lessons learned. That's a pretty good introduction to the book. And it's a funny book. It's a poignant book. It's a quite original way of telling his story and making some important points about race in America 8 years before it has now become such a really more intense and purposeful conversation in the wake of the killing of George Floyd in Minnesota. I first met Baratunde online shortly after the birth of Twitter in 2006. Soon afterward, I caught his nascent stand-up comedy act on a small upstairs stage in Harvard Square, and that led to my inviting him to be my guest on TKC 1. Since then, I've enjoyed following Baratunde's career. He took a job at The Onion, the humorist newspaper, national newspaper. He worked on The Daily Show. He gave a keynote or two at South by Southwest, and generally has become a widely followed and respected writer and speaker on the topics of technology, media, politics, and race. In the 60 days since Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd on video, Baratunde's writ has intensified and deepened, as you will hear in the interview that we recorded between L.A. and Maine on Wednesday, July 22nd. We had each separately listened to the conversation from 12 years ago, and that prompted me to ask about his trajectory that began with our shared enthusiasm for the original Kindle, which had been released about 8 months earlier.
I actually re-listened to that very first episode today. Wow, I was so excited. and I think my trajectory with the Kindle, to be more directly answering your question, is it has blended in to a set of devices and services alongside others that I did not expect. My iPad is very highly used. My Kindle is a little less used than it has been in the past. I'm even mixing in paper and hardback books again, just to remember what that feels like. But the overall idea of the Kindle as this platform, the value of a digital library, the value of being able to kind of search back over one's own history, I still like that, and I still believe in that, and I would still 8 times out of 10 say I'll just get the Kindle book. Because of quarantine, I'm like, I think I want to touch paper, because just touching things is much more exciting than it was 6 months ago. And so I don't put that on Amazon. And then I think, Amazon's changed, and my attitude toward that company as it's gotten larger and larger and larger and absorbed more pieces of my world. Like Amazon didn't own Twitch 12 years ago. They didn't have Prime Video 12 years ago. They weren't the everything store that they've become, or the everything platform that they've become. So I'm feeling out a relationship with Amazon, which is not as over the top enthusiastic as it was 12 years ago either.
Yeah, exactly. That was the one thing I said I wasn't going to talk to you about, because I think talking about Amazon might be more awkward than talking about race with you, because I'm such a fan, and you called them rapacious, and you've been fairly candid about your latest version of Amazon. But why not? What the heck?
We don't have to jump right into it. There's I'm not so against the company that I don't use its products, right? And so I think, here's what I'd return to, though, and what still doesn't exist. I had this dream of this literary platform that the Kindle could become, where we would log in to this device and thus log into a world, and like a social world, where I could co-read with people. I could read an edition of a book annotated by other writers, and kind of have this digital collector's edition. I still remember the dream that I had, not on your show, but around that same time of, I'd love to read, the Constitution, but like marked up by the writers of The Daily Show. And then I ended up working for The Daily Show, which is also cool. But like, there's just a unique packaging and expression and socialness that still doesn't exist. I mean, it's still pretty rudimentary to go into the Kindle and then just see passages highlighted by thousands of other anonymous people.
Yeah.
And that's not so meaningful, so I'm a little disappointed, given all the, like, Bezos is launching rockets and trying to get to Mars. And I'm like, cool. Can my friends and I read together though? Could you, you've got all the infrastructure. I know it's possible to do. So it's just not a priority. And that's one of the revolutionary things I was excited about that has not come to pass. What about you?
Well, I have a similar sort of. I remember thinking that would be cool, and also they did try it. I could follow different people, and I would see their annotations, and it ended up feeling just disruptive. It was, the idea of it and the reality of it didn't mesh. And then the other place where that's sort of available now is Goodreads. I mean, I can share my annotations on Goodreads. And that's another place where I love Otis Chandler, and I've had him on the show, and Goodreads just seems like a great idea that I never use. I'm so busy trying to get to the next 20 books on my Kindle that the idea of going somewhere to find my next favorite book, it's like some of these good ideas just get crowded out by how busy my life is.
Yeah.
And, but yeah,
Here's something else for you. In terms of how the trajectory has changed, I did not, at the time that we first spoke 12 years ago, happy anniversary, Lynn, I did not own a lot of Kindle books. It was this rare thing. I was using it. I had bought, you asked, what's on your Kindle? And it was like 5 books. And I was reading a lot of blogs at the time and taking part in the New York Times' version on the Kindle. And so Kindle's not an internet device for me. It actually is a book reading device. I can read the New York Times much better through their app on my iPad. And same with other newspapers I subscribe to. So it's not that I don't really read blogs per se anymore. Mm-hmm. There's like social media now, which is a new thing. I'm not going to PDF that into the Kindle and read it even in the paper white edition. So I read it for books, and the screen's gotten better. It's more legible. It's smoother. It's more paper-like. But the difference is I own a bajillion Kindle books. It is so easy to kind of hoard digital media in the same way that like my Netflix queue is full, and what's up next on my Apple TV is full, and the articles that I save to Pocket, that I never come back to. The Kindle's kind of become that, where there's still value because I'm actually spending money now. I like this author and I want to support them. And my friend has a book, but do I actually read the books? And so it's just this big, beautiful library that I often don't touch. And that is a really different experience than 12 years ago. The surplus of content is much greater than I expected.
Wow, yeah. It's become bloated or something. It was all potential and all new then, and now it's just become something different.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that is, the flip side of that is instant access. Like there's so many books. I had that opportunity to interview Roxane Gay for a podcast I was doing with 23andMe all about DNA and health. And I had never read her book, Hunger. And I was able to kind of get this thing on the go, read it fast, skim it, highlight some things, show up much better prepared to that conversation with her. I hadn't read every single page, but I'd read more than the blurb, on a website. And that kind of instant access and searchability where I could see like, oh, where did she talk about this? Where did she talk about that? As a producer, the Kindle's been great to prepare me more for doing what you're doing right now. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I've been enjoying just the power of 12 years, when so if you look ahead 12 years, you will be 54 on September 11th. I didn't know you had such a fraught birth date.
Powerful birth date. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see, I'll be 81. My grandsons will be 26, 18, and 16. And Jeff Bezos will be 68. Biden will be 89. Trump will be 86. It's a big chunk of time, 12 years, when you start thinking like that. And I think that's my way of wanting to switch to the things that you're working with so intensely now on race and police violence and the issues in your Live on Lockdown and the podcast We're Having a Moment. And if you think about the things that might change, that seem to be changing now, addressing systemic racism, just bringing this whole topic to the attention of people that maybe weren't paying attention or had been carrying some comfortable delusions about the state of the country. And you look ahead 12 years and you imagine looking back on this moment. Do you have any sense of what role you want to play, how you would help people understand this moment in light of where we might go in the next 12 years? And I was also aware of, John Lewis's passing, and you think of his moment in the 60s and what he did, and how does that compare with this moment? And I guess I'm asking you to, step out of the daily work you're doing at such a sort of online way to sort of picture yourself and where we are now in the context of where we've been and where we might go in a big chunk of time like 12 years.
Thanks for the easy one, Len. That's great. Great. 12 years from now, Jeff Bezos will actually appear to be 12 years younger than right now because he will probably have found a way to inject all the stem cells directly into his spine and live forever. I fully expect that. Well, that form of progress is well in hand. On the murkier, more human and qualitative matters of like race and power, to step out of this now. 12 years, I really, really hope and expect that we will have had a female head of state in the United States, so we can leave the league of losers that we are now. And not having accomplished that, I look forward to a different set of arguments where we're not entrenched in this kind of as ancient battle about, well, should we save ourselves from calamitous climate crisis, or like how many billions are we going to let die? Like, it'll be really great to have arguments about like regenerative agriculture versus like hydroponics, like that's the sort of debate I would really look forward to. Or is it the Tesla battery for solar, or is it like the Rivian battery, and who's got the best electric car? And I think if we elevated our contests and our conflicts so that we were all still fighting for a thriving, that would be really, really great. And I think 12 years is enough of a window to have moved past, some elements of the Civil War we keep relitigating, whether it's about, the Confederate flag or statues, or is it a sound political strategy for an entire party, the Republican one, to kind of double down on aging, smaller thinking, more racist tendencies within their party, rather than look to the market opportunity. These are supposed to be market thinking people, of young people and people of color who are going to be much more of the future, not the absolute future. So it would be really nice to have two political parties again, at least, both believing in democracy. And it would be great to have like tax subsidy arguments again, instead of authoritarian or not kind of arguments that we're having. And then on the what people do in race and policing, it will be really nice to get to a place where we are looking at what we all have to gain from this and what we have gained. Like 12 years, we might be able to then say like, oh, when we were arguing over how much money police departments should get and whether they should be allowed to use bayonets, first of all, that was weird. Like, what were we thinking? Like, really? Bayonets from the Revolutionary War? That was a real argument, Grandpa? I would love your grandchildren to be like, what was going on 12 years ago before you had the ocular implant and clearly couldn't see the world for what it is? So it will be fun to move past that argument about the use of police force and the lack of accountability, and for people to not see it in the light of, oh, we got to stop police from hurting this one group of people too much, Black people. And instead be like, oh, we need to set up a system of accountability and power for all of us, because I just don't like living in a world where cops have that much power without some kind of check. Like, it's not a good look for me. I don't want that stuff done in my name. It makes me feel weird. And I certainly don't want to hurt a Black person. But even outside of that, like, I'm not co-signing on it. And so the level of investment in that better future, what I consider to be a better future, at least, a more anti-racist future, I want in 12 years for more people to want that for themselves and not just for the other, for an immigrant or for an indigenous person or for a Black person. That's cool. I'll take it. But I would want 12 years from now to be like, oh, this is about all of us too. Mm-hmm. That would be really nice. Yeah.
That's when it gets to be sustainable. It becomes embedded in who we are at that point.
It does. And I think if we could lose some of the shame and the fear involved in that evolution, because I know a lot of people are like really afraid. What does that look like? What do I have to wrestle with? What do I have to acknowledge? Oh, that's such hard work. I don't want to do that kind of work because it's embarrassing. What will I find out about myself or my habits or my family? But refusing to look there is a guaranteed way to prevent progress. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, I think there's something greater waiting. Brian Stevenson from the Equal Justice Initiative talks in these terms. It's like there's something better on the other side of that. John Lewis kind of fought for that. And I hope in 12 years, at least more people see it. I have no illusions that in 12 years it's all going to be resolved, but I hope we're just in a place of more of that, not less.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the things that you're doing now, Live on Lockdown, I think you've had 28 episodes of that.
33.
33.
Yeah.
If someone hasn't tuned into that, what will they hear if they have a listen? And is it's every Sunday you're doing it?
So in general, the shows have been happening Sundays at 3 p.m. Pacific on Zoom, and then streamed out from a Zoom kind of live audience studio into YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. And then there's been a Thursday night show exclusive to the Instagram Live platform. That's more of an evening affair. And so that's been at 7 p.m. Pacific. And I, have been pretty consistent. I think I've missed 2 shows so far. As we are recording, I won't be doing one this Thursday. I'm just taking a break for a number of reasons. But what people can hear, and that's going to change too. But as of now, on Sunday, it's like a community, kind of a live call and a video call-in show. I always share my perspective on what's happening with the coronavirus, especially in the United States, and lately what's happening with race and policing and systemic white supremacy, especially in the United States. It's kind of this dual weather report. Let's check the racism radar and let's check the COVID radar. And then what I like to do on that Sunday show is go around the room, around the studio, and see what is happening in people's lives. So it's this local check-in, and I've gotten a lot out of that, learning from people how their governments locally are responding, what they're thinking about, whether it's about policing or about COVID or both. And then the Thursday shows are more of a performance, more of a monologue, but in dialogue with the comments. And I use the IG platform to take topics that people want me to riff on. And so it becomes a 1-hour kind of improvised political / comedic show powered by people input. So that's what you can expect. I think what's starting to change, I'm building a new show called How to Citizen with Baratunde. And it's built on the foundation of all these live participatory shows I've been doing since the coronavirus pandemic hit the U.S. And so we're going to start using some of those live taping slots to make How to Citizen in the spirit of Live on Lockdown. But I'll probably be doing some rebranding, and I don't think I'll be creating How to Citizen and doing 2 Live on Lockdown shows every week. That's a bit much. So I'll probably repurpose one of them and then see what I do with the other. But the spirit will always be me in dialogue with you, viewers and listeners, and actually you, Len, like in bringing your dog Sophie on, which really we needed that day that you came. Well, you have one of the cutest dogs I've ever seen, and sometimes we just need a cute dog to help us through whatever tough moment we're going through.
I was struck by your choice of the name for the new show or initiative, How to Citizen. Obviously, the word citizen, and you're changing it into a verb. Can you say a little bit more on how you settled on that as a way to kind of frame what's next in your work?
Yeah, so I wrote a book called How to Be Black, and I just want to own the whole how-to franchise. So we start with blackness, then we open it up to everybody else. And then we'll see where we go from there. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff people need to know how to do. So how to, let me just get that prefix. So that was one reason. I had, been trying to make this show for 4 or 5 years now and gotten various degrees of success with it. First as a TV show, which was then just going to be called Citizen, like no sentence, no other words, just Citizen. And the how-to came in the spirit of, I think we have forgotten something as Americans in particular, but as people in democracies in general, we have forgotten our own power. We have forgotten what it means to be in a small d democracy, to be in society with one another. And sometimes that gets reduced to voting. And some of us have forgotten how to do that, or it's been made very difficult for us to do that because some people are afraid of voters. But there's so much more to what it means to participate in society. And so the spirit of like, we're going to learn something, like this is how to, this is a guide, this isn't just a rant. This isn't just complaining about how broken and problematic everything is. And there's a lot of that. Rachel Maddow will continue to do a great job of that. She's so good at it. I don't need to try to do her job again. let me shift the lens toward what can we do and who can we learn from in our collective power and how to use it, how to wield it. It's a freaking sword, and we've just left it lying on the ground. So the how-to added a sense of empowerment to a listener or a viewer, which is like, I'm going to get something out of this. I might even be asked to put something into this. And that's the exchange. That's the contract we make in a society like ours. So I want to renew that contract, and I want to make it fun and like inclusive and participatory. It's somewhat in the spirit that we've done with Live on Lockdown, but even more and more structure, more guests, and more to-dos, more asks and opportunities for people to feel their power again.
When I was looking back to the 12 years ago, what you had, Baratunde.com was your home then and now, so that's been consistent through the 12 years. And I
just got some new fonts since then.
New fonts, that's right. Yeah. I think your 3-word profile that was probably on that site at that time was comedian, author, entrepreneur. And now it's author, activist, comedian. And when I looked at that, there's two things haven't changed. The comedian and the author, you've kind of moved the position of them. But 12 years ago, if I've got this right, you were thinking of yourself more as an entrepreneur, kind of a media entrepreneur. And now you're an activist. And I have to say that in listening, I think the show you did where there were tickets, where it was sort of a presentation, and some of the other stuff, and I worked a lot on a campaign this past year. It doesn't feel right to say you sound like a politician, but you sound like somebody who someday, maybe in the next 12 years, if things change or whatever, who would certainly have the skills, the passion, the vision to offer themselves as someone who could take on that kind of responsibility as a senator or this or that. And so, you're Baratunde.com 12 years from now. Any chance it's going to be saying author, comedian, senator or something like that?
I'd have to check my domain registration history. But as a joke, in the late 2000, early 2000s, like 2009, 2010, I bought Baratunde for Senate.com. So I'm just sitting on it. I'm more likely to do something absurd and satirical with it than legitimately try to join the same legislative body as such great Americans as Ted Cruz. I just can't quite imagine showing up with him as a coworker at this moment. But the service angle is there. And I think what I make media, and that's what I'm increasingly good at and sort of focused on. And there is still an entrepreneurial spirit to it. I have a Patreon, and that helps pay for this microphone that you're seeing me use, and a camera that it's so good. I need to actually read the manual to make sure I'm using it the right way. You don't just point and shoot. It's like it's a proper video camera. I haven't had one of those ever. It's very exciting. So there's a business to this, and there's an entrepreneurial spirit, even outside of formal, business plans. But the way that I see for now to use what I have been developing as a voice and a way to tell stories and a way to open doors for people. It's like, I think people listen to me. What am I going to do with that? I could just sell stuff. I could sell Kindles. I could be really good at it. I did 12 years ago. We probably sold many units off the backs of that episode. But I'm increasingly interested in helping tip us in a better direction. And I refuse to believe like it's game over for democracy or for people-powered politics, for self-government. And so it's like I'm slowly acknowledging more explicitly that's where I want to make my media. I want to tell stories that fill in the gap of stories that we haven't heard. I want to tell stories that give people a voice, literally bring them into the show. I want to give us something to fight for, not just against. And there is definitely a political cadence to that. Those could sound like commercials for I want to give us something to believe in, not just to fight against, and then I suddenly take on a Massachusetts accent from the 1950s. And ask now what your country can do, all that. So, but yeah, that's a very lengthy dodge. I have no plans to put myself forth in that explicit way. I don't rule it out, but it's just not part of not a conscious grand plan right now. I think stories are very powerful ways to help shape the world, politically shape it, allow for more possibilities. Even this idea of like the battle between Tesla's battery and Rivian's battery, like that is a great battle. We should live in that world. How do we get that to happen? And if I can soften people up into thinking, oh, that's actually real and possible, that's a worthy fight to be having, through shows, through stories, through occasionally great speeches, and actions, that's cool. And if that means putting my name on a ballot as opposed to voting for someone else's name, maybe. It's just in 12 years from now, maybe, but it's not really the goal.
Yeah. That makes sense. Talking about race, I think you've said and others have said it can be awkward. And why is talking about race awkward? And I guess the related question is, I've seen you help people to dare to be awkward in talking about race through humor. You'd be saying, well, we're going to do this. Morning, we're going to talk about race, And so, he's acknowledging the awkwardness. And sometimes I feel like, I'm just afraid I'm going to say something stupid. But can you say a little more about that? And maybe that goes to the kinds of conversations that you've had with, white and black people in the past 3 months or so. What's the awkwardness about, and what role does humor play to get us through it?
We're embarrassed. We carry fear, we carry shame, we carry sadness and pain around race. We carry anger around it. And when we don't know how to process those emotions, we say it's awkward. And that is part of the story, but that awkwardness has other names, like the words I just used. And so few of us have given ourselves permission or given others permission to really acknowledge those feelings and say, look, I'm afraid of this conversation because I don't know where it's going to go. I am angry about this conversation and I don't know where it's going to go. I'm sad. I just like to acknowledge all the trauma and violence and theft. And it's like really just heartbreaking. If you actually look at it, if you take the time to pause and not turn the page too quickly, it's really painful. It's really traumatic. It's really sad. And so why would you want to lean into all those things? And it's not limited to race. That's how we are in our relationships sometimes. It's how we are with ourselves, how we are with our parents. And so we're still human. And so we carry that humanness into this realm where we have such little practice and such little permission and such little skill at navigating the emotional terrain around this very fraught topic. So humor is like a bypass switch that allows you to tap into physicality and feeling without doing it directly. And so it's like, you can release tension, and in releasing it, you're acknowledging, whoa, I guess I was tense because I feel the release of something. That's pretty cool. You can laugh at something, and laughter is like a step past awkwardness. Like there's awkward laugh, but laughter is permission. I'm giving you, me, Baratunde, as like a person who's using jokes sometimes, I'm giving you permission to laugh at this thing. It's okay to laugh. I know it's weird, but to laugh is to agree. It's like to share a point of view for a split second.
Because you're both laughing.
You're both laughing. So you're sharing an experience. You're agreeing with a truth. Not that it's the only truth, not that it will last forever, but in that moment, that feels really true. True enough to involuntarily blast oxygen or carbon dioxide, as is the case, out of my lungs, somewhat involuntarily. You don't control it. It just happens to you. And so it's a nice, the bypass route to some part of ourselves that we don't always
denying
get access to.
I suppose a certain kind of humor could be like taking drugs because you can't stand the reality of your life. But
no, that's true. Not all humor is doing that high service. Right. Some of it is doing avoidance. We can use all these tools in multiple ways. And it's not always bad. But I think for me and awkward conversations and race, one of the things I did this TED talk about white people calling the cops on black people. And I did not start that talk with, hey, white people, stop calling the cops on black people. You could kill us. Even though that was basically the message, I delayed that message after I introduced myself, told you a bit about me, loosened you up with some jokes, let you see some humanity, let you identify with some part of you that also exists in me. Oh, that sounds familiar. Oh, I was an awkward teenager too. I showed the most embarrassing picture from my teenage years. I'd never shown that picture before. And now it's all over TED.com. That was very much on purpose. It wasn't like, I think this is a random thing to throw in a talk. It's like it was a strategy to get people to listen. Because avoidance is something that we are so good at with things that we need to not avoid. And I speak from personal experience with that too.
Yeah.
So, creating an invitation and a more welcoming space to hear that message, humor has a role in that too.
Yeah.
And some of the best people at it, John Oliver does it every week in a very concise and it's well cited, well researched, almost thesis presentation kind of mode. And then you have someone like Samantha Bee who does it. You have someone like Whoopi Goldberg who does it more through stories, not through kind of PowerPoint. So there's a lot of different ways to use it as well. But I think the value is it can get us back in touch with ourselves, and it can allow space for some of that legitimate fear and anger and sadness and shame to find some other outlet. Yeah.
Keeps people in the room or keeps them in the conversation longer.
It's a bribe. Humor is an emotional bribe.
The pleasure of another.
I'm going to make you feel good.
Laughing feels good.
It's the tension.
Yeah.
There's the highest wire act, and I've had 2 shows formally where I've sold tickets online and during the pandemic, and to talk about George Floyd and to set that up in a show that people know is supposed to be comedic. It's like, where is this guy going to go with that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And then for me, it's, one of the things I discovered literally walking through my neighborhood is like, oh, I know how to identify my white neighbors now.
With the black.
They're the ones with the Black Lives Matter signs. That's so cool, and it's kind of funny. It's certainly like a potential to be very funny depending on how I package it and time it.
Yeah.
But we're talking about this moment. We're talking about civil unrest, and I'm also talking about white radar systems, and that's an awkward race joke, and it's also very true, and it's a bit funny.
I told my wife about that because when I heard that and we were walking, she says, we should have a Biden sign and we should have a Black Lives Matter sign. I said, well, actually, Baratunde had this really interesting observation. He walks around his neighborhood in L.A. He says, I know where the white people are because they all have the Black Lives Matter sign. And it kind of made me less eager to put a Black Lives Matter sign on, right. But what's sort of the deeper guidance or awkward suggestion to someone who's going through the Great Awakening and trying to get it right? Put the sign up or not?
I put the sign up. If it feels like something that you want to express and remind yourself of when you come home from your distance walk around the block, if it's something you want to announce to the world and the neighbors, something you want to amplify because you feel like I have a platform, it's my front yard, let me use it.
Right.
Do it. For me, that joke was born out of a couple of things. One is I live in a very gentrifying neighborhood that was largely Latinx, and LA people are in their homes so much that you don't know who lives there. And so it really was like, oh, I think I know who lives there now. Oh, wow. Okay, cool. End white silence. I don't think that's like a brown family saying that. I think that's a white family saying it to other white families or to themselves. So it's not a total dismissal. I'm not saying people shouldn't do it, but to me, it was kind of a fun observation. There is another layer, which is, okay, after the sign, like what else?
Yeah.
And where are you banking? Where are we banking? Where are we spending our money? Where are we involved in the civic work? Mm-hmm. Are we tuning into the city council meetings where the budgets are allocated if we have any interest in that? Not everybody has to do that, but more people could. Mm-hmm. And so how do you make Black Lives Matter, not just say it? And so it's a great step one. Lawn signs, great step one. Put a Biden sign up, then make sure you vote for him. You know, like actually make him the president. Don't just say I want him to be president. And maybe that means donating money. Maybe that means phone banking. Maybe that means talking to members of your family in regions that are more swing state based. So I'm always trying to argue for more and ask for more and try to do more. And I don't always do it myself either.
Good. Well, anything else we didn't talk about you want to mention that's coming up for you, or help understand the moment?
You know, I always like to, Baratunde.com is the place to go. And, you know, my podcast, We're Having a Moment, it's 6 episodes. It's like a little box set of this moment. So check it out, because I think there's an alternate history that we're writing right now, sometimes in collaboration with people from Live on Lockdown, as to what this moment has meant. And then How the Citizen is coming soon. So stay tuned through my mailing list at Baratunde.com, or my text message number, which is 202-894-8844. You can just shoot me a text and you'll get on a text distribution list. But it's not just blasts. Like, I sometimes go back and forth and I ask you questions. And I often play with regional targeting to understand, well, what was election day like? Or how do you feel about what's going on here? Or help me out. I'm looking for someone who does this. And so it's actually been a great way to find people's stories and what matters to them. And to answer way more questions from folks, because people got a lot of questions out there. So I get questions answered, but also you might as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the last thing I would offer up. Cool. Thank you.
I have been speaking with Baratunde Thurston, TED speaker, author of How to Be Black, host of Live on Lockdown, and the We're Having a Moment podcast. Thanks very much, Baratunde.
Thank you so much, Len. Good to see you. And it's great to not be running this show. I've seen you on screen so recently, and I'm like running switches and trying to drop videos in. It's always a blur. Much more focused this time. Give my best to all your family and, of course, to Sophie.
That's it for this week. I have not given up all hope of having Jeff Bezos on the show next week, but it's getting to be a vanishingly small possibility. I've been talking to a couple of people in the public relations department. They said they've forwarded the request that he come on the show. I sent it a month ago, and the person that was handling it, Chris, I sent him 2 emails, including one last night at 3 a.m. I suggested if Jeff doesn't have 30 minutes, if he wants to just call my Skype in number and say hi for 5 minutes and tell us what he's reading on his Kindle, that would be kind of sweet, but I think it's just not going to happen. In Jeff's stead, my plan is to reach out to James McQuivey, because he hasn't been on the show for a couple of months, and I'd like to hear what his thinking is on the pandemic, how he's been spending the time. And let's see, he won't have a chance to have watched Bezos and the other tech companies testify before Congress. That would have been interesting to get his opinions about that. But it's always good to talk to James. And if I can't get Jeff Bezos and I can get James McQuivey, that sounds like a pretty good show to me, and one I'll look forward to. I really want to thank all of you that have, some of you have listened, I think, to every show in 12 years. And when these anniversaries roll around, I'm very grateful for having intelligent, engaged people that listen and give me ideas and give me feedback. And it's really quite remarkable. And I'm gonna keep going. At some point, I suppose I'll find a time when it's declare victory and move on. But not this year. We'll see what's around the corner for quite a while longer. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles in Ocean Park, Maine. Thanks for listening. Bye.